Hi, everyone. Just say we'll give everybody a few more minutes to gather and then we'll get started. Good. So we have quite a full agenda today, so we'll go ahead and make a start. I am Amanda Curry Brown, and on behalf of CCAC, wanted to welcome you to the webinar on black carbon and NDCs. I coordinate the Clean Air Flagship for CCAC, which is focused on elevating the issue of air quality through global and regional cooperation, science, advocacy, private sector engagement, and catalyzing finance. If any of you are interested in learning more about the flagship or joining our Clean Air Task Team, you can get in touch with me at amanda.brown@un.org. We have a really fantastic group of speakers lined up today to discuss how countries can consider black carbon, air quality, and health in their NDCs, and some of the opportunities and challenges they've faced. As I mentioned, it is a very full agenda, so I'd like to ask our speakers if they could keep to their allotted time to ensure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. For those of you attending, you can use the Q&A tool at the top of the Teams window to submit questions throughout the presentation, and those will be used for the discussion at the end. You can also use the chat function to engage with one another, and I'd encourage you to pop a message in there to say where you're coming from today. So without any further ado, I'd like to check, do we have Abraham on the line yet? If not, maybe we can go ahead and go on to Chris Malley, from a senior research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute, who is going to speak a bit more about how do we get more action on black carbon through the use of NDCs, and then we can come back to Abraham if he joins later.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and welcome everybody to this webinar. It's great to see so many familiar names. I feel that perhaps this webinar is a little bit upside down because I see so many people attending this webinar who've done so much on black carbon through the CCAC and others so far. So I feel I'm talking to a crowd of people who are already experts in this topic. But I think there are 5 main things that I want to try and get over to you today. And if we go to the next slide, the first is why this is important. Why are we talking about putting black carbon and air pollution into climate change mitigation commitments? And the simple answer is that by doing so, we're putting protecting people's lives at the center of our climate change plans. I'm sure we're all aware that the aggregation of climate change mitigation actions that have been submitted so far are woefully insufficient to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And we need some arguments, we need some strategies, we need some mechanisms by which countries can commit to more ambitious targets and, importantly, then implement them. One contribution that the CCAC has made is to make it abundantly clear that the more ambitious you can be on climate change, the more benefits you get for yourself because of the air pollution reductions that you get alongside it. And this is shown, I think, really nicely in this graph from a study from the European Commission Joint Research Centre that showed in 2015, when the Paris Agreement was signed, the pledges made then to reduce greenhouse gases reduced air pollution at the same time in a way that would avoid 400,000 premature deaths per year, which is pretty good. But the key finding from this study was that the more ambitious our action on climate change, the more ambitious our action to reduce greenhouse gases, because toxic air pollutants like black carbon are emitted from the same sources, the more benefits to health that we get. And so they calculated that if we move to a 2-degree temperature limit trajectory, we can more than double the health benefits from our climate action. We can avoid 1 million premature deaths per year in 2050 if the Paris target is achieved. And I think this makes it feel much more immediate when we talk about climate action in terms of how many lives we can prolong from reducing exposure to air pollution and avoiding other health risks. And I want to test this with you now. One of the really nice things, if we go to the next slide, is that there has been a large increase in the number of countries that are committing and acknowledging air pollution and black carbon in their NDCs. And we can see that on the next slide. When the Paris Agreement was set up in 2015, only a few countries mentioned that air pollution is something that could be reduced at the same time. When we looked at the NDCs that was submitted before COP26 in Glasgow, the number of countries mentioning air pollution, short-lived climate pollutants, more than doubled. And there's various ways in which they've included them. I want to highlight 2 really good examples, and we're going to hear from more later. So if we go to the next slide, we get Colombia's nationally determined contribution, a fantastic example of a NDC that has not just set a target on greenhouse gases, but has also set a target to reduce black carbon. They committed to reduce black carbon by 40% by 2030 compared to 2014 levels. And when they worked with the World Health Organization, they calculated that this was enough to avoid 3,000 premature deaths per year in 2030. And this means that Colombia can say that their climate plan is not just going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, but that actually 3,000 Colombians will not die every year by 2030 if they achieve that plan. If we go to the next slide, we see another fantastic example of this. And let's, play a game. If I said to you, if you were seeing Nigeria's nationally determined contribution for the first time, and I told you that Nigeria's nationally determined contribution submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change could reduce Nigeria's greenhouse gas emissions by 47% by 2030, what would your reaction be? Perhaps people would think, like Anna Maria is highlighting, fantastic ambition, but Anna Maria is deep in the climate change world. To the average person, the fact that Nigeria is reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by 47% is perhaps neither here nor there. But at the same time, Nigeria calculated what air pollutant emission reductions could be achieved from that 47% reduction in greenhouse gases and from the actions that are committed to there. And so that allows them to reframe their climate change plan, not just as a plan that would reduce their emissions by 47%, but they can now say that Nigeria's climate change plan is a plan that could avoid 30,000 Nigerians dying every year as a result of them breathing air that is unsafe. To me, that's much more immediate. That's a plan that I want to get behind and I want to help to implement because it has an immediate benefit to Nigerians, to the people that are taking action. So to me, that is the value of these targets and the integration of black carbon and air pollutants in their nationally determined contributions. It gives you a stronger reason to want to take this action. Next slide, please. And one of the really nice things, which I think is shown in the participation that we have here, is that these two examples, Colombia and Nigeria, come from a global community that have been working on these issues for well over a decade. And, you know, people like Mr. Itapol, like Pablo from Uruguay, like Elena and Tatiana from Moldova, you know, they become really good friends because we've been working on this together for a long time. So if you're joining this webinar for the first time and you think that this sounds exciting when you listen to the other speakers, rest assured that there is a big community out there coordinated by the CCAC who are working on these issues and can provide a lot of the expertise that you might be looking for. Next slide, please. The third point that I want to make is that Colombia, Nigeria didn't include these additional elements in their NDC to highlight the benefits they could get to health. They didn't include them lightly. There is a whole process that is long-term, that requires sustained capacity over multiple years in the Ministry of Environment of Colombia, in the Federal Ministry of Environment in Nigeria, and latterly the National Climate Change Council, that allows them to have confidence to commit to reductions in short-lived climate pollutants, including black carbon, and to state these health benefits. And the CCAC has a methodology, has an approach that it has supported 30 countries with in building this capacity on short-lived climate pollutant planning. So fundamental to being able to highlight a black carbon target in your NDC is the ability to assess black carbon, understanding where the sources come from, understanding how that might change in the future, understanding how different mitigation measures can contribute to those reductions. Black carbon is not emitted by sources that are directly under the control of the Ministry of Environment, with the possible exception of household energy. It requires talking to the Ministry of Agriculture about agricultural waste burning, to the Ministry of Transport about diesel vehicles, to the ministry responsible for waste management, for municipal governments, who all have a role in black carbon emission reductions. And so engaging different stakeholders is really important. So there's been this process in Colombia, in Nigeria, in many other countries to provide the foundation and provide the confidence that leads to targets on black carbon and quantification of health benefits. Next slide, please. And so just to highlight that, in Colombia, Colombia has been engaged with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition since it was founded. It took them, when they committed to a black carbon target in their NDC in 2021, they'd been working with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition for 8 years. The things that provided them with the confidence to include that target and the confidence that that could be included, they developed a national short-lived climate pollutant mitigation strategy that had evaluated where within the Ministry of Environment and more broadly, they could integrate black carbon into their planning and processes. One of the key ones was including black carbon within their national greenhouse gas emission inventory. I mentioned earlier that Colombia's black carbon target is a 40% reduction compared to 2014 levels. The reason it's compared to 2014 levels is because that is the year in which they have the highest confidence of what their black carbon emissions were, because it's quantified in their national greenhouse gas emission inventory. Countries don't have to include black carbon in their national greenhouse gas emission inventory, but doing so provides you with the basis for monitoring this over time. Next slide, please. Next slide. And the thing that I want to, the fourth point that I want to make is that not all targets are created equal. The relevance of having a black carbon emission reduction target or quantifying the health benefits of your NDC, I think there's a few things that you need to consider when thinking about committing to such a target. One really important one is that it is a target that is additional to what you're already doing on greenhouse gases. Um, Colombia's black carbon emission reduction target, a 40% reduction by 2030 compared to 2014 levels, I think is the most ambitious in the world. So it's got the ambition. I think it's realistic because there are a set of mitigation measures that are specified that will achieve that 40% reduction. But most importantly, this results in additional action being taken. Having this target results in additional action being taken that wouldn't otherwise have been taken to reduce greenhouse gases. And by that, I mean that in order to achieve Colombia's 40% reduction target, they added 3 mitigation actions to their NDC that were not included to reduce greenhouse gases. Number one, Euro 6 vehicle emission standards for transport. Number two, thank you. Number two, off-road machinery standards, large emission source of black carbon because they burn through a lot of diesel. And number three, reducing agricultural residue burning, which is a large source of black carbon emissions. And so I'll just finish by saying that there is a huge amount of effort that goes into developing the necessary background material and evidence for having targets on black carbon and including it in NDC. It is a huge lift, as many people who are joining this call will know. But it really is just the beginning. In order to set that target, I think you need to think really early about how that target will be implemented. And that's why having a national SLCP strategy to sit behind it that outlines a set of actions, how they will be funded, what capacity needs to be in place sustainably is really important, because otherwise it's just a target that doesn't have a implementation pathway. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Chris. That was a really fantastic presentation. And I think you highlighted a very important point around the large community of people who are working on this and kind of the family that's grown around it, and how there are definitely always there people who you can ask for help and who've been there before you. So I think very useful. On that note, I think we've got Abraham Ortinez, who's the head of the National Institute for Ecology and Climate Change in Mexico, who is also longstanding friend of mine from CCAC, and going to speak about the benefits, opportunities, and challenges of including BC and NDCs.
Hello, everyone. I will share my screen. You can see my presentation.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for everyone. Good intervention from Chris Malley. I will continue in the same way that Chris Malley mentioned several of the things that we are developing in terms of black carbon. What are the challenges and opportunities in terms of black carbon in NDCs? I think it's very relevant that we can include some of the specifically surely climate pollutants and black carbon. Mexico at the beginning start with the committed to the rules of course greenhouse gases in the Paris Agreement in terms of the 22% at the beginning, and was the first country to include 51% of our carbon emissions in terms of the target to mitigate. Based under the baseline, it's under the bow scenario, as you can see in the graph, we can have some commitments in terms of the NDC 22%, and now we have the 35% commitment in terms of 2030, where we are included several of the sectors where are emitted the black carbon specifically and other precursors of surely climate pollutants. What are the main sources in terms of Mexico to the black carbon emissions? We have specifically household energy is one of the main targets of black carbon. The other one is the transport, and the third one is the oil and gas industry, and other sectors are relative have a contribution, but most of them are coming in the three that I mentioned. We are doing some exercise with LEAP specifically in terms of what are the scenarios and what are our targets in terms of actions. And I will show some of them. Here we can see the percent of the contribution. Most of them are residential, specifically is household energy. And we have some specific actions in terms of mitigation. The other thing we include is in the economic sectors, specific SDGs in terms of the adaptation as well. And we have the economic activities included transport, I mentioned, power generation, and household energy. And all of them are related as well with the SDGs. And we are doing some very good exercise in terms of commitments of SDGs, and then how with the actions can, in terms of mitigation, NDC can include them. And of course, we are going in the direction that both actions could be very, very stronger in terms of mitigation. In terms of the synergies of adaptation and mitigations, climate change is improving in terms of air quality. And it was mentioned as well by Chris Malley, the public health and the food security is one of the other targets we are following. For us, it's important, and this graph can show how we look into the mitigation in terms that we can do it in the short time. This is a graph of ozone in Mexico in terms of the profile in terms of tendency. In 1990, how is the high concentrations is in the Mexico City area. And several of the strategies during the last 25 years show that we can decrease the concentrations of ozone. Black carbon, we are thinking, and other, of course, pollutants, and of course, greenhouse gases can go in this direction in terms of the actions. Black carbon and other shortly climate pollutants should be monitoring to evaluate the actions and health benefits as part of the MRV systems. We are doing in Mexico, but what is the problem? There are a lack of long-term black carbon ambient measurements. We are doing exercise. If we mentioned that one of the main sources is the household energy, we are currently developing some measurements in the communities because we are improving some energy cooking systems, and we are monitoring now in the communities in air ambient concentrations, and we are improving with new technologies. So the idea is, of course, see how it's changing the concentrations in the time. So this is one of the exercises we are doing currently. So as well, we have the base we developed with the SAE, with Chris Malley and other colleagues, the strategies in terms of integrated strategies in terms of surely climate pollutants and air quality and of course climate change. So we developed some of the strategies, and we are doing some strategies by sectors. We include, of course, black carbon in transport sector, brick kilns, sugar cane. We do as well with the methane emissions, waste and wastewater, and of course other sectors that are relevant in terms of mitigation climate pollutants. As well, it's important we can include, and I mentioned with SDGs in terms of can do some a good merge between the strategies in terms of surely climate pollutants, NDCs and SDGs. Other thing is very important, developed and supported by the science. We include the community in Mexico to help us to understand what happened with emissions, what happened with the sources, and of course we include this in our national policies. And most of them, the reports or papers or articles or papers, of most of the community is including the actions and mitigation strategies in terms of black carbon. And of course, the communication. The communication is very important. Communication is for the people can understand what we are doing currently and what is the actions that we are doing as well, and what are the benefits in terms of mitigate climate change and of course health. That is one of the main targets. In summary, we have, I will not read it completely, there are some of the ideas that we developed here with the people from CCAC as well and people from SAE. It's important to integrate narratives on air quality climate change. It's possible in most of the sectors. We are doing several actions in air quality and we are doing some actions in climate change. We need to talk each other, was mentioned as well by Chris Malley. People from climate change need to talk with people from air quality, and of course we will not reinvent the wheel. We need to do some in the same way. Transport sector, if we are going in the direction for electromobility, is the best way, and we are thinking that air quality and policy in terms of climate change will need go in the same direction, not opposite strategies. For example, the roadmap we established that integrate inventories is important. The inventories is one of the targets as well. There are many of the inventories coming from the convention, and of course, there are many of the inventories coming from air quality. We need to integrate them, and we need to do in the same. What are the benefits of the actions and climate change in the same inventory? And looks how is the benefits in terms of air quality. It's important that the programs remain the same mitigation objectives, seeking multiple benefits. It's important, multiple benefits, and avoid applying opposite actions I mentioned. Territorial planning and mainstreaming with SDGs, as I mentioned, be included in air quality and climate change program. And the management of the cities must be integrated. We are looking now currently focus on the cities as well and integrate with the cross-cutting aspects in health, gender, energy, economic, territorial, and reality-oriented communities. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abraham. That was really good. And I think important to congratulate Mexico for being a leader in this area. Before we move on, I do just want to remind everybody that they are able to pop any questions into the Q&A tool for any of the presenters, and then we can come back to those at the end of the session. Moving from Mexico, we're going to hear from a couple other countries that have been working to incorporate black carbon, health, and air quality into their NDCs. So first we have Chai Por-ing, the CCAC National Consultant for Cambodia, who will be presenting on behalf of Kevong Watana, Deputy Director General of the General Directorate of Environmental Protection in the Ministry of Environment in Cambodia, talking about integrating air quality and SLCPs into Cambodia's NDC 3.0.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi again, good evening from Cambodia. I'm sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Chai.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Chai Paul from Cambodia. I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Kevong Watana, Deputy Director General, Ministry of Environment Cambodia, as he could not make his available time to attend this afternoon, as he had mission to province. Sorry, and he allowed me to speak on his behalf. Yes, today I'm speaking about integrating air quality and SLCP into Cambodia NDC. Next slide, please. Yes, as we Cambodia showed that SLCP is matter for our country, and what we want to mention at this webinar about SLCP, focus on methane, the carbon, and HFC. And strong warming effect over a short period of time, as we all know that, and If we mitigate SLCP, we can have a major benefit as well as improve air quality, health, food security, etc. And I would like to inform you that black carbon for NDC 3.0, Cambodia has not set a target for its mitigation measure at this time, as several issues within the line ministry. So black carbon is indirectly addressed through several measures, for example, electrification, transport, agriculture, and residential sector. Next slide, please. Yes, I'll move on to methane reduction from waste and agriculture. For this NDC 3.0 with support from technical experts, Cambodia has set a clear target to reduce about 600,000 tons CO2 equivalent in organic waste by 2030, and 2.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent for biodigester by 2030 through improved manure storage, training the farmer on methane reduction practices that we think that's important for a reduction of methane from agriculture. And let's move to HFC, that we focus on cooling from PPU sector, that we have set the target for 45%. It's about 1,800 gigaton of CO2 with conditional, unconditional. However, if we get support from partner, we can reduce HFC up to 65%, and it's equal to 2,370 gigaton of HFC reduction. What we can support with reduction target through the low GWP refrigerants and application of MEPS, as well as labeling. Also through the start of our Cambodia and Cape and sub-degree 92, that I would like to inform you that Cambodia is now implementing sub-degree 192, that the amendment from sub-degree 47 on ODS management. That the new sub-degree 192 is focused on HFC mitigation, which align with Kigali implementation that Cambodia have recently implemented. Next slide, please. Yes, with that action, MOE and Line Ministry also set MOV system for HFC through custom data and import for data, that Cambodia has data from Ministry of Environment for quota, and the custom data that importer has imported HFC into Cambodia. So through the two system, that MOV for HFC can be used. Also with support through the implementation of NCAP and long-term strategy for carbon neutrality, also the national energy efficiency policy can support the implementation of HFC reduction. Also with NDC 3.0, Cambodia also plan to include the women technician by 10% in 2035. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let's move on to the air quality management in NDC 3.0. We discussion with consultant on NDC 3.0 Cambodia has planned to expand monitoring networks and data center. I would like to inform you that Cambodia has deployed air quality management equipment and station about 63, which 13 are reference-based station. But within that number, MOE has insufficient actual data for air quality. So within this new NDC, Cambodia wishes to expand the reference-based station up to 25 stations. That Cambodia has 24 provinces and one city. So we wish to expand all monitoring stations with support from partner. Also, we strengthen emission control in factory, CMS and filter. Also, dust control and at construction sites through pilot program and enforcement. Also, as I mentioned, MOE operationalized new sub-degree on air quality, noise and vibration control. This is supported by CCAC, and CCAC has support several projects for Cambodia. As Chris mentioned, that for mitigation of residue burning has a strong impact on reducing black carbon, and CCAC also support the implementation of this measure to reduce black carbon from agricultural residue. The next slide, please. Yes, this is a core benefit of SLCP and air pollution reduction that we have included in NDC. There's several areas that at this slide would like to pick up 7 areas. For example, public health, climate mitigation, agricultural productivity, energy efficiency and cost saving, environmental justice and gender equity, urban liability, regional, global leadership that MOE and with Line Ministry sees their benefit from reducing of SRCP and air pollution really benefit to not only environment but also human health. Yes, before I end my presentation, I would like to highlight the key message from Mr. Kaewong Watana. By cutting short-lived climate pollutant like methane, the carbon, HFC, and air pollution, Cambodia accelerates near-term climate action and deliver cleaner air, safer food, improved human health, and green job for its people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that how you highlighted kind of the multiple benefits of taking action on climate and air quality at the same time and what that does for the people of your country. So we want to move along to the African continent, where we have Ben Breda, who is the GMP and CCAC focal point, and another very familiar face from the Ministry of Environment, Sustainable Development, and Ecological Transition, to talk about the experience in Cote d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen now. All right, thank you for giving us the opportunity once again to share the experience of Côte d'Ivoire with black carbon mitigation planning and implementation. It's been a wonderful journey working on this with this vibrant community and colleagues that's presented before me, Chris Malley, Abraham, and it's good to talk again about this wonderful experience today. So this we always start, I think, to give you a little bit of background about what it would take to integrate black carbon mitigations into NDC planning. First of all, it will always start with developing good assessments of what your level of black carbon emission is within the country. We started in almost a particular difficult context in Côte d'Ivoire, where we were not familiar with mitigation assessment, but also taking into account air pollution and black carbon into this type of activities. And our first assessment was released in 2019 with the support of the CCAC SNAP initiatives. We were able to develop the first black carbon assessment as part of our national SSCP plan. And from this assessment, we were able to identify the key sources for black carbons and also priority measures for other SLCPs and including also black carbon. So this assessment was critical at the national level because it helped to influence important process such as the NDC revision. The first revised NDC of Côte d'Ivoire was heavily influenced by this assessment that we done, this integrated assessment on short-lived climate pollutant and then for the commitment that we have now, based on that previous experience that we did under the SNAP initiatives, we were able to expand our mitigation measures to include more sectors, but also to take into account some of the constraints that we had in doing this type of assessment. For example, take into account the overlap between plans, thanks to the use of one of the grid tools that we are using now, the LEAP IBC tool, which has been developed by colleagues at the Stockholm Environment Institute. We were able to also do some comprehensive mitigation assessments of all the pollutants at the national level, particularly black carbons. And the plan now includes clear targets based on that assessment for SLCPs, including black carbon. And this, for example, 60% of BC emission that could be reduced by 2030, based on our current plan and commitment. And it's also something important that was mentioned previously by Chris Malley, the possibility of highlighting the benefits that could be derived from this action, the health benefit that could be derived from this action. And for example, for Côte d'Ivoire, is 7,000 premature deaths that could be reduced by implementing measures on our NDCs and also measures targeting black carbons. So this plan was the updated version of the plan was released 2 years back, and it was presented during the regional Francophone workshop that we had here in Abidjan. and is a plan that is now at the stage of implementation and serve as an example for integrated climate and cleaner planning in the regions. So coming back to specific measures on black carbons in Côte d'Ivoire, the measures targeting three main sectors. So we have 18 measures in the SSCP plan and 10 targeting black carbon. One of the first sector is the residential sector in the household energy sectors. So the measures there mainly target the improving biomass cook stoves and also using improved fuel, cleaner fuel for household cooking. And so these are the main measures. There are four main measures for the household energy sectors. And doing this planning, we have this screening table to clearly see what are the measures, what's the ambition for each measure, what priority is given to each measures, and also the key players to be involved in that in the implementations and the planning of that measures. Same also for the transport sector. Transport is also one of the key sectors that we are looking at for black carbon mitigations in Côte d'Ivoire. And the measures here really looking at implementing Euro 5s for the vehicle renewal fleet, also in combination with the improvement of fuel standards, which is also something key for the country, because Côte d'Ivoire is not only a fuel importer country. We are also a refinery country. Also, there is a critical issue with upgrading the refinery and also promoting electric vehicles as part of the mix for the transportation fleet, and also looking at the mass transportation aspect of transport, of road transport in the country. And then lastly, we're also looking at waste sector by reducing open burning of waste, and also agriculture by reducing open burning of agricultural residue. And one of the advantage of having such an approach of planning is the possibility of seeing the effect of the measures that you're planning on the emissions, black carbon emissions or other SFCP's emissions in each sectors. For example, here in Côte d'Ivoire, we can see that the measures are really effective at reducing black carbons in the transportation sector, but also residential sectors, and some energy sectors, some household energy sectors. So that's why you see some of the measures, many of the measures presented above when looking at specifically these sectors. So I would like to end here by sharing with you some of the few challenges in implementing this type of assessment and approach. First of all, you will have to deal with some cross-sectoral coordinations when looking at SSCPs and black carbon mitigation, because most of the measures targeting these pollutants will be present in many sectors. So you will have a cross-sectoral approach and have to deal with several actors at the same time, several line ministries, and be able to involve all these key players in your process of planning and creating a good understanding and coordinations to bring all these into your process. Also, developing your implementation pathways is, as it was mentioned also earlier, is something that is that will require a lot of resources. You have to somehow be patient and consistent in bringing all this wealth of information. For example, in Côte d'Ivoire, targeting black carbon, we had to interact a lot with researchers at the universities and bring on board some of the key research output, such as some emission factors for black carbons and firewoods that were developed at the university, for example. So this kind of intensive consultations and bringing all this updated information into your process will somehow take some time and a lot of effort, but it's worth doing it because at the end of the day you get more robust result with regard to your planning process. And then lastly, as I was mentioned, we are at the implementation phase of this plan. So you need to find a way of, matching your mitigations expectations with the resources that are available there into with different donors. You need to see what are the mechanisms and appropriate windows that will help implementing your mitigation measure. This requires another set of analysis that needs to be done. And currently, with the support of CCC, we're also thinking of along this way, and probably as part of the next cycle of NDC revision to see how we improve the SSCP's implementation in our NDC by having some kind of investment plan for black carbons and other SSCP's mitigation measures. So it's also one of the challenge that many of the country will be facing when they reach the stage of implementations of these specific measures. So I would like to stop here, and I want to thank you for, again, the opportunity to sharing this experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing your experiences, and I think highlighting some of the challenges, but also how you go about addressing those, and particularly the need to be patient and persistent and to work across government, and to it can take a long time, but the result is ultimately worth it. To change tracks a little bit, we are going to have Nina Jeffs, who's a senior analyst at the Clean Air Fund, talk to us a little bit about how to leverage finance and investment for including black carbon and air quality and NDCs. So how do you get the money behind making these things work? Nina.
Hi, thank you for having me present alongside such fantastic other speakers. I've learned a lot from the presentations so far as well. Like Amanda mentioned, I'm from the Clean Air Fund, which, if you're not familiar, is an international philanthropic regranter, which is working towards a world that breathes clean air. We do a lot of work on air quality and also super pollutants, particularly black carbon and tropospheric ozone. And we've been working with partners on NDC support as well. So I kind of have three main messages today. The first one is looking at the state of air quality finance internationally. There is dedicated international air quality and black carbon funding in the landscape, but at the moment it's quite limited. The second message is that there is increasing interest from multilateral development banks and bilateral donors on air quality funding. We're really seeing more and more engagement on this topic, and that's something we spend a lot of time doing. And thirdly, there's a chance to use NDCs to attract finance and show demand for air quality and black carbon funding, which is really important at this juncture. So first of all, I'm going to take you through a bit of the latest data on what the landscape looks like on international finance. So you may or may not be aware that Clean Air Fund has a flagship report on air quality financing that we've been producing with our partner Climate Policy Initiative every year since 2019. And it uses kind of analysis of the OECD DAC database on financing. And for the report released last year in October, it covers data from 2018 to 2022. We have another report coming out in October with the latest updated data. And this covers a few different types of international development funding. So it includes funding from multilateral development, finance institutions, bilateral ones too, national governments that provide international funding, and multilateral climate funds. And so I'll just take you through some of the most recent information we have about where the state of funding is at. First of all, we've seen that dedicated funding for air quality, by which I mean funding that's specifically focused on clean air projects, has recently hit a ceiling of about 1% of international development funding that's available, which is very low given how important air quality is. It's the biggest environmental threat to health. I think we're all aware of the reasons why air quality and black carbon are important. The number is bigger when you look at the total international development funding that promotes clean air as a co-benefit of the project. So maybe it's not the primary objective, but it's a co-benefit that's been identified. And one thing I would say to nuance the information presented here is sometimes clean air and the health co-benefits are not actually identified as co-benefits, and that's something when we talk about demand raising, that's really important to flag. So the other thing we see is that in terms of the quality of funding that's being provided for air quality projects, 92% of the funding is being provided as loans. And I mean, Ben from Côte d'Ivoire was talking about challenges around resource mobilization. This is challenging when we see that only 6% of overall air quality funding is coming in the form of grants, which is significantly lower than the overall kind of picture. When we look at which institutions are providing the best sort of low-cost loans, we're seeing that bilateral development finance institutions are leading the way on that. I'll share a link to the report as well if people want to look more into the data. It's detailed, and I'm kind of summarizing things here. And if you look at the league table, if you will, of which institutions are providing the most air quality funding, you see that multilateral development finance institutions, so largely multilateral development banks, provide the largest share of overall air quality funding, actually by quite a long way. They make up 63% of the funding that's being distributed at the moment, and you can kind of see the most recent league table there, if you will. Looking at climate finance specifically, because as we're all aware, I think, and has been very well covered by other speakers, air quality and climate are very linked in their sources and solutions. We again see sort of this co-benefits point as maybe not getting as much recognition as it should be. So out of the international public climate finance that's being deployed, only 2.6% of it is explicitly targeting outdoor air pollution. And more of it is maybe recognizing that there may be air quality benefits. But I think this is particularly what we might want to look at when we talk about air quality and black carbon and NDCs. And finally, we also, for the first time last year, did some analysis on the finance that's being deployed that specifically identifies black carbon as a black carbon mitigation as a target. And in terms of targeted black carbon reduction projects, it's very small. When you look at the funding for projects that are addressing black carbon rich sources, so some of the sectors that the other speakers have talked through, it is actually quite a higher figure, looking at 560 million each year during the period that was analysed. So again, I think it's really about articulating the co-benefits to black carbon mitigation to make sure that we have a clear picture of what funding's actually being given and what projects are being supported that will have an impact on black carbon mitigation. So as I mentioned, we've seen growing interest from development finance institutions in the last couple of years, particularly in the last year. And I just wanted to flag a couple of things here. So firstly, the World Bank released a report a couple of months ago called Accelerating Access to Clean Air for a Livable Planet. It's a chunky report. I would highly recommend checking it out. I think it's a really excellent analysis, and it's an important reflection of their increasing interest in air quality and air quality financing and understanding the air quality co-benefits of their work and their investments. So just a couple of points to pull out is that the report highlights that the number of people exposed to dangerously high levels of air pollution could be halved by 2040 with targeted policy action. And like other speakers have kind of talked through, policies that achieve multiple goals, integrated air quality and climate action, can be a really efficient and cost-effective approach. It estimates the economic benefits of integrated pollution management policies to take this integrated approach to climate change and air quality, which I think is really excellent because it talks about the economic benefits and not just the costs, in terms of talking about tackling air quality with a positive framing. So it's the analysis shows that the economic benefits of integrated pollution management policies could develop savings as high as $2.4 trillion by 2040. And it outlines a range of policy measures and in particular financing measures to achieve this goal. I know I don't have time to talk through them, but I'd highly recommend reading that report, particularly on the financing measures section. And the other thing I would mention is that Clean Air Fund for several years has been engaging with development finance institutions essentially around increasing their funding for dedicated air quality projects, but also to think more about how air quality can be integrated into other projects that may not be specifically focused on air quality, but they might be development initiatives, they might be transport initiatives, they might be climate initiatives. And sort of through our engagement, we know of other development finance institutions that are looking at setting air quality targets for their finance and so forth. So I think we're seeing movement on this front. And it was quite a collaborative approach taken to put together this air quality toolkit for development finance institutions, which we worked with Ricardo and Clean Air Asia on. And it's basically a practical guide for these institutions to integrate Clean Air Fund into their investments. And we were really pleased that quite a few development finance institutions have endorsed the report. And so hopefully we'll be using it and the tools going forward. So this is kind of the supply side of the finance topic. And the final point I want to mention quickly is about attracting investment via NDCs, or kind of the demand side signaling. So like I mentioned, I think articulating the health co-benefits and economic co-benefits of reducing air pollution can really help to make the case for investment in this area, both domestically and internationally, looking at financing sources. And I think in some of these sort of supply side conversations, we've heard that integrating air quality and black carbon into NDCs is really critical to demonstrate that there's political commitment behind these projects, especially when it's done in a cross-government way, like many of the presenters have shared excellent examples of, and also demonstrates that there's real demand for this sort of integrated air quality and climate approach. And there's an increasing amount of evidence, like the World Bank report and also this study here that I've cited around taking air quality benefits into account can really help to make the economic case for this type of investment as well. So, for example, taking air quality benefits into account, the climate actions that have a positive return on investment increase from 16 gigatons to 24 gigatons of carbon removal annually. So finally, before I wrap up, I think when we're talking about what demonstrating demand for air quality and black carbon finance means, I think the other speakers have covered this very well from their own country's examples. So I won't repeat what's being said there, but setting ambitious standalone targets on black carbon and demonstrating alignment with air quality goals. Where possible, modeling estimates of health and economic co-benefits is really fantastic. And this could be, for example, modeling premature deaths avoided, hospital emissions reduced, healthcare cost savings, productivity increases. And I know Stockholm Environment Institute does really fantastic work on this, as do many people on this call today. Measures across high emitting economic sectors, I think, are also very important. And finally, as much as possible, elaborating what the financing needs for conditional NDC activities are is really important to demonstrate that demand. So just to wrap up, I'll share the resources I mentioned in the chat, welcome any questions and follow-up conversations, and just to leave you with the point that while some of the dedicated air quality and black carbon funding in the current state of play is fairly limited, we're really seeing increased interest in this area, and integrating black carbon and air quality into NDCs is a really powerful way to demonstrate demand and attract more finance for projects in this area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Nina. And I think really important to reinforce the point of looking for ways to use climate finance to advance air quality work and vice versa, and continuing to talk about those multiple benefits of action. So I now will move to Anna Maria, who is a CCAC senior consultant, who is going to talk through the CCAC guidance on including black carbon and air quality in NDCs, which will help give you a taste of how do you do this.
Thank you, Amanda. And hello to everyone from around the world. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to be sharing with you today an overview of the guidance that the CCAC has prepared to help countries and other institutions that are supporting countries in the revision of their NDCs. As you all know, there's a very intensive process going on right now where countries are expected to submit new NDCs by the end of this year, by COP30. So let's just start with a quick look at where do these nationally determined contributions come from and why are we doing them, and what exactly are countries supposed to include in those nationally determined contributions. So the Paris Agreement, which is part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, it's one of its sister agreements, included a new approach for countries to explain or to communicate to the world what they intend to do to address climate change, and that is both mitigating emissions as well as adapting to climate change, and for the developed countries, including also the kinds of financing and technology capacity support that they will provide for developing countries. This was a new approach from the previous one, where only developed countries had commitments or responsibilities under the convention. And now every single country that is a signatory to the Paris Agreement has to prepare these nationally determined contributions. As the years have passed since the Paris Agreement, and it's been 10 years, every year there have been new decisions within the negotiations that have clarified, okay, exactly what do we mean when we say a nationally determined contribution? What is expected of countries to include in that? And that's been very helpful. There have been these what are called the CMA decisions. Those are the negotiations of the Paris Agreement, and they generated a rule book with much more specific information about what should be included. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then 2 years ago, the countries participated in a global stocktake. This is also part of the Paris Agreement and a new instrument that says every 5 years countries will undergo a process where they will assess, how are we doing? Are we actually meeting our goals under the convention, which is to stabilize greenhouse gases? And are we meeting our goals under the Paris Agreement to protect the world from surpassing the 1.5 degree safe temperature limit? So that global stocktake, the information from that global stocktake then gets folded into the new round of NDCs. Those NDCs happen every 5 years. So the first was kind of a trial run at the signing of the Paris Agreement, and then in 2020, and now we have a new round, and it's being referred to as NDC 3.0. We now know that NDCs must include all greenhouse gases, all economic sectors, and all categories of those sectors. And some of those categories are what we have heard in the examples from the different countries and Chris's presentation as well, about, what are we talking about within within each one of the larger sector. There are these subsectors or categories that countries can take action on. The NDCs must align with the 1.5 degree temperature target and include information to support clarity, transparency, and understanding. And what that means is that when countries begin implementing their NDC, there has to be a way for the world to see that they are in fact making advance on the work that they have committed to under the agreement and under their NDC itself. So you have seen during the presentations references to BTRs. Those are the biennial transparency reports, or the BURs, and those are reports that countries have to submit every 2 years. Well, depending on what category of country, they have to submit and say, this is how we're doing. This is what we have done. So it's very important as countries are developing their NDC to already design the reporting process so that that's easy. And we've heard from many of the presentations today just how in the space of air quality and black carbon, there are resources and there are initiatives that are happening in countries and regionally that those who are working on the reporting processes for NDCs can draw from to get the kind of information they need for the reporting. So it's not necessarily required for countries to create new reporting processes, but to be able to pull from a variety of sources that already exist, and then perhaps fill the gaps on top of that. And then finally, each NDC or each round of NDC must be progressively more ambitious than the previous. And that's important to keep in mind because when we talk about air quality and black carbon, which as we saw in Chris's presentation, many countries in the first round of NDCs did not include any reference. And then second round, we began to see some references. It's one of the biggest opportunities in this round of NDCs for countries to pull from what many of them are already doing in the different sectors, identifying, okay, here there are black carbon or air quality related measures that we could highlight in the NDC. They're already there, and they can become part of the NDC, and then building ambition into those so that every round countries are endeavoring to do more and more. And I think several of our speakers pointed out that that's the beauty and the magic of the NDC is that it inspires countries to do more than they would do if in the absence of the Paris Agreement and of these instruments. And it also, as Nina pointed out, it drives funding and it drives resources to countries because it sends a strong signal to the financing institutions that a country has made these measures a priority in their work. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so CCAC has put together these guidelines. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of. Oops, apologies for that. Trying to get rid of this so we can see better. We put together our guidelines, and there are 4 main pillars in the guidelines. CCAC recommends that all the NDCs include the economy-wide targets, both carbon dioxide and the non-carbon dioxide pollutants. And this may sound repetitive because, as we just heard, that now all countries are supposed to include all of the greenhouse gas emissions, but it has not been the case up until now. And so we really hope that in this round of the NDCs, all NDCs include all of the greenhouse gas emissions. But as some have pointed out, black carbon is not a greenhouse gas emission, but it is a climate pollutant. And so we want to encourage countries to include black carbon as well. Second point is that CCAC encourages that countries integrate their air quality planning into the climate strategies. And we heard from many how those are mutually beneficial and mutually supportive. Also harnessing related global and regional and national strategies, pulling in the resources, the data, the modeling, and the expertise from those other initiatives. And we saw, for example, in Cambodia's presentation, how they pulled the Kigali Amendment hydrofluorocarbon reductions into their NDC. And so they're using the information from the Montreal Protocol work that their country is doing, and they're pulling that information into the NDC. So that's an example. And then finally, to ensure that there is comprehensive reporting on all of those pollutants. And we heard, especially from Chris, about how to strengthen that reporting, and there are a number of resources, and the guidance helps you also identify how to prepare that reporting and what are the resources out there to help. So some policy recommendations that we highlight in the guidance for countries is the importance of including sector-specific targets, and making sure that those targets are clear in each one of the sectors. And we'll take a look at that in a moment as well. But I also refer you back to Chris's presentation that was, I think, very clear, showing the different sectors. And we heard from the countries as well on the sectors that they have highlighted. Making sure that there are specific reduction measures in each one of those sectors. So not simply stopping at we will reduce emissions from the transport sector, but as we saw in Colombia's presentation and in their NDC, the specific targets that they have within the transport sector that give a strong signal of the direction and the ambition that they have for the transport sector. Leveraging the co-benefits, and we saw a lot of those co-benefits mentioned. Those co-benefits really build confidence in the country across all of the line ministries and also among stakeholders and industry, giving them information about why it's so important to integrate these air quality and black carbon measures because of the wide variety of co-benefits. And we heard about the health and food security, the resilience, economic and environmental co-benefits of taking these air quality and black carbon measures. Aligning those climate and air quality commitments, as I mentioned in the previous slide, engaging stakeholders, really important part of the NDC process. And what we see in most countries is that there is a very robust stakeholder consultation process. It's very important because those stakeholders are often the ones responsible for the implementation and for sustaining the new measures, making sure that the implementation is successful. So including them early on in capacity building and getting their views in the process of setting the targets and measures is really key to ownership on their behalf, so that they help with that constructive implementation after the NDC has been submitted and needs to actually take effect. And then, of course, as mentioned, the monitoring and reporting. So just a quick, flash review of what are all of the sectors that we're talking about when we talk about air quality and black carbon. Quite a few different sectors, and we got examples on many of those. But I want to point out again that in the NDCs, countries are invited to not only cover mitigation action, but also adaptation action. And here in the air quality spaces where we really see those adaptation co-benefits, building resilience in the food, in food security, air quality and health, which has all the economic benefits. And so those air quality management and air quality standards are a really big opportunity to include in the NDCs, to show ambition and also to drive the focus in that direction. So here's an example of the kind of support that the CCAC guidance lays out for you in the document, highlighting the opportunity, and then looking at what are how does a country create a unique goal, what kind of specific mitigation measures could be included, and then an assessment of with stakeholders and with government, which one of these measures makes most sense for our country to include in the NDC, and then estimating the black carbon co-emissions and reductions for each measure. And that gets into the more technical side, and that's where, for example, institutions like the CCAC or those that collaborate with the Clean Air Fund and others have the tools and resources to support countries that may not have the modeling and the technical capacity to do that type of those types of estimates. We can help at this stage build that into the NDC preparation process. The CCAC guidance supports the whole NDC cycle, and we also saw something very much like this cycle in Chris's presentation, where it's an ongoing sort of 5-year cycle, and starting with information collection and assessing that information, preparing the new NDC implementation, but then this really important section here, which is on the reporting, tracking progress, and other aspects that that help countries then build that next ambitious cycle 5 years later. So a few notes on the reporting process, because this is oftentimes the biggest challenge for countries, is ensuring that that we establish comprehensive inventories, set clear measurable goals and targets, disaggregating the data on emissions and mitigation actions, and then integrating those air quality co-benefits that many of our presenters highlighted. Strengthening institutional capacity is a critical part of the reporting and information gathering process, because we're always learning by doing. And so the capacity building in these early stages of NDCs is really critical to building a fluid reporting process. So every year it becomes easier to do the reporting. Then promoting, public engagement, of course, as mentioned, the benefits of doing that. And even looking at sort of the regional dimensions is an important part to fold into this, and we encourage that in the reporting as well as in the building of the NDC. Just an example of what this looks like in the guidance, we go through many sectors and give very specific examples that countries can consider whether those sectors and policies and actions are relevant to them. So this is, these are not specific recommendations per se. They're more examples that can be used for countries to look and see, what could they do, what kinds of policies would be helpful for each one of those sectors: transportation, household activities, and there's about 10 sectors in the chapter. And to wrap up, then here is a QR code that will lead you directly to the guidance. The guidance is available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. And we do hope that that it's useful. In addition to the specific guidance on black carbon, there's also there are 4 more volumes, that one on methane, one on nitrous oxide, one on the cooling sector, and then one that just gives sort of an overview introduction to strengthening NDCs. We have now had 3 wonderful webinars, including today. Next week, you are invited to a similar webinar on agriculture, or tell your colleagues if it's relevant to them. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A or in the chat, and be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time, and so we're not going to have time to take Q&A, but we can go through those and try to reach out to people as possible. Definitely, if you have any questions or want to learn more about anything you've heard today, please get in touch with one of the team who's been involved in organizing the webinar. I think we've heard a lot of really interesting presentations today about the processes countries have followed, the challenges that they've faced, and the steps they've taken to overcome them, and also the benefits of integrating kind of health and air quality and black carbon specifically into NDCs, and bringing together multiple stakeholders and leveraging finance. So I hope you all have enjoyed the time we've had together and have learned a lot, and hope you will be able to join future webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.